All right, it's 2:33, so I think it's time to begin. My name is Stefano Materia, and today I am very pleased to introduce you to Daniele Peano. Daniele Peano works in our CSP division, is a junior scientist, and he is one of the developers of our Earth system models, and in particular, he focuses on the land component, so everything that concerns the global carbon cycle, vegetation, soil. He has recently published 2 papers, in particular on the role of vegetation and the growing season of the natural and agricultural vegetation. And today is gonna talk to us about the new development of the land component of the CMCC ESM model. Daniele, please, you can share your screen. The floor is yours.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Daniele Peano, and today I will talk about the recent development and achievement on the land surface modeling at the CMCC. Okay. Oops, sorry. So in this presentation, I will introduce the land surface model as part of the climate system and how it is modeled here at the CMCC. And I will describe some recent development and work done on different aspects of the land surface modeling, which are soil, describing the importance and influence of the soil characteristic description in the land surface modeling when we look at the land atmosphere fluxes and interactions. Then I will talk about the land use. So we know that the land use, for example, the reforestation is one of the possible solution to store the atmosphere carbon on soil. So it's interesting to see what the state-of-the-art land surface model are able to estimate this type of process. Then I will talk about the vegetation. When we talk about vegetation, we are talking about the green leaves, which are an interface between the land and the atmosphere. So it is fundamental to be able to represent the presence of leaves in the right space and right time of the year. And then I will describe some possible outlook. Okay. So we know that people is living on land and it's exploiting its natural resources. And we experience day by day weather exchange, which are also strongly influenced by the feedback with the land surface. One possible example on also a longer time scale can be the historical land cover and land use changes that we have performed on land, which has altered the characteristics of the Earth surface, which are impacting directly climate and also the biogeochemical cycle. So it is important to be able to represent the main land surface processes, which include many processes such as the heat fluxes, the description of snow, soil moisture, the vegetation, and the runoff. And they are relevant aspect to be represented, but complex and also poorly represented in the state-of-the-art climate model, since we still have large biases and uncertainties, especially at the global scale. For this reason, it is fundamental to investigate the abilities and limits of the state-of-the-art land surface model in order to be able to improve the next generation of climate model. Here at the CMCC at a global scale, we use the community land model version 4.5 as a global representation of the land surface in its biogeochemical configuration. This model has many aspects. Some of them, I'm trying to listing some of them. For example, one of the features of the CLM is to using a subgrid structure when we describe each land point. So each land point take into consideration the different aspects that you can have on land. So the vegetated part of the land, lake, urban, or a glacier, or crop, even crop. Then it is describing the main surface fluxes between the land and atmosphere, the energy surface fluxes, by mainly considering, for example, the land albedo, and also the impact of the different type of soil and vegetation. Then it's also important in the water cycle, considering the complete cycle of the hydrology on land. So by taking the precipitation from the atmosphere, giving back the evapotranspiration from land, the storage of water on land, as well as the runoff and the movement of water. Then, since we are using the biogeochemical configuration of the model, the CLM 4.5 is also describing the main carbon and nitrogen cycle, which take into consideration many processes, such as the photosynthesis, of course, the impact of fire, and the phenology, so the change of leaves during the year, and also all the respiration and exchange of carbon and nitrogen between land and atmosphere. Now, the recent development and analysis that I will present here and that has been done here at CMCC are done thanks to two European projects. The first one is Primavera, which is focusing on the impact of the horizontal resolution on the description of the climate system, which is which has been used as a part of the effort for the IRSMIP community effort. Then we have Crescendo, which is more focusing on the impact of land use, carbon cycle, and nitrogen cycle, which is also part of the activities of UMIP, LS, FreeMIP, and CPMIP. So I will start by talking about the soil, and so if I want to investigate if the soil characteristics are influencing the land and atmosphere fluxes and interaction. So the soil hydraulic properties, which are described in the land surface model, are fundamental to predicting the exchange of water and energy between land and atmosphere, since they are regulating processes such as evapotranspiration, the water infiltration, and also the runoff. These hydraulic properties, which are, for example, the soil porosity, the hydraulic conductivity, and water retention in soil, are computed based on soil texture, which is so the combination, the content of sand, clay, and organic carbon in each layer of the soil, and the so-called pedotransfer functions, which are converting this soil texture in the hydraulic properties. At the global scale, the distribution of this soil content, so the amount of clay, sand, and organic carbon, can be derived from various sources, and this can create some uncertainties and variability that we wanted to evaluate. In particular, we take into consideration two different sources of soil texture, which can be used in CLM 4.5. The first one, which is the default case, is based on the data from the International Geosphere Biosphere Program, the IGBP soil dataset, and also from other two datasets for the organic carbon distribution on soil. And then we have a novel dataset, a high resolution dataset, which is the soil grids 1 kilometers, which is a possible alternative. So when I'm talking about the differences in this content, we can see that are quite large. These are differences in percentage between the distribution of clay, sand, and organic content in the first layer of soil. And we can focus in, there are changes all around the globe, but we can see where are located the largest one. So for the clay distribution, we have changes in the Siberia area, in the Central America and also in the South America. For the sand differences, we have a completely different representation of Africa, Northern Europe, north of US, as well as Australia, while the organic carbon content are mainly different in the high latitude of the North Hemisphere, and also partially in the southern part of the South America. So keep in mind these differences. We can see how they are impacting on the land simulation, and so the main variable. So the first one which we can look at is the soil water, which is the directly impacted variable on land. And here we can see that we have a reduction of the soil water content. Here we are looking at the surface layer of soil, so the first 10 centimeter. We have a large impact with a reduction of the water available in the Sahara region and in the Northern Europe, and which can be related to the change in the sand distribution that we have seen before, and an increase in the Central America and the Siberia areas. We can also see that there are different mainly increase in the Sahel region. Then we can also look at the exchanges, so the heat fluxes between the land and atmosphere. So here we can look at the latent heat flux. And here the difference is mainly located in the Sahara, in the, I will say, the north of Africa and in the Central America, which can resemble what we have seen in the soil water. And in the sensible heat flux, the changes are more located at the high latitudes, which are more, that can be also related to possible impact of the organic carbon distribution. Another thing that we can check is the difference in the interaction between land and atmosphere. To do so, we use the terrestrial coupling index defined by Biermeier, which uses latent heat fluxes and soil water to estimate the interaction between land and atmosphere. Here we have the impact at the different season. And if we look at this figure, we can see that despite differences in magnitude or sometimes also the sign, we have some regions that show larger differences, which are the African continent, the Australia, and the Central America in all the season, which are also areas that we see that present quite large differences in the representation of the soil texture. So we have that the soil and hydraulics properties can be retrieved by the soil texture dataset by the pedotransfer function. However, we can have various sources of this soil texture for the global land. And here we tested two of these possible sources. And this show us that this is a possible source of uncertainties and differences impacting, first of all, the soil water availability, which is then also influencing the land and atmosphere fluxes and interaction. So this can be a source of uncertainties for the couple model between land and atmosphere. Now we will move to the land use. As I said before, using the land use is one option, one strategy that has been applied to store atmosphere carbon and to mitigate climate. So we want to see how it's our model, if they are able to predict the proper distribution and impact of this strategy. So as I was saying, the soil stores a large amount of carbon, the so-called soil organic carbon. And so it is possible for interest for the climate mitigation measures. So here I give a small scheme to what is going on. So the soil organic carbon is a balance between the input fluxes, which is coming from the plant litter, and the output fluxes, which are given by the decomposition activity. So the litter is depending on the plant productivity and so the type of plant and the amount of plants. For this reason, the land use change can alter the land cover type and amount. In this way, can disturb the balance between the input and output flux, making the land a possible source or sink of carbon. So we want to evaluate the ability of the state-of-the-art land surface model in representing these changes when a land use change occurs. To do so, we used as observation data which are called the chronosequences, which use the space for time approach, and we consider the two different cases. So we have two sites in which deforestation occurs and two sites where afforestation occurs. Here, the afforestation cases are located in Russia and Denmark, while the deforestation cases are taken in southwest of France and Costa Rica. And the two deforestation cases have also a small difference, because in the southwest of France, the forest has been changed to cropland, while in Costa Rica, the forest is changing to pasture. So two different type of management and use of land is also available. So here we can see what a set of land surface model, state-of-the-art surface model are representing as a soil organic carbon response to this land use change. Here we have the two afforestation sites in which we can see that in general, the land surface model are quite well capturing the direction, the trends of the change. And for example, in the Val d'Aie region, which is the Russian one, also the magnitude is quite well represented. Here we can see that the blue line represents the CLM 4.5 hour model. On the other side, in the Denmark site, we have quite good representation as well of the model. We can also see some large differences in the observation data, since also the chronosequences data has its own limit. But in general, the direction of change is quite well captured by the model. When we passed to the deforestation site, the discrepancy became larger. In particular, we can see that the land surface model has an initial shock with an initial increase of the soil organic carbon, which can be related to not proper representation of the harvest activity and the management, and also a quite slower decrease of the soil organic carbon content after the deforestation occurs. So in this type of change, the models show a worse result. So as I was saying, the land use is one possible climate mitigation measure. And so the land surface model should be able to be applied to have some estimate and prediction of this, of the impact of this strategy. However, some limitations still remain. So in general, the model are able to capture the overall direction of the afforestation case, while in the case of the deforestation site, we have an initial shock, so an increase in soil organic carbon, which is absent in observation. And also the changes during time is also represented slower compared to the observation. So the model should improve their skill in this representation by taking into account, especially for the deforestation site, including some management practice, such as and harvest activity, in this way to neglect, to delete this initial shock that is not available in observation, and also to make it faster the response of the soil organic carbon to the deforestation activity. Focusing on the vegetation, as I said, when I talk about vegetation, I'm talking about the green leaves, which are then an interface between land and atmosphere. So we need to represent them in the correct time and correct space. So the representation of the evolution representation of leaves in a dynamical way is quite a recent feature of the land surface model, because it is coming together with the representation of the carbon and nitrogen cycle, even if it is a quite important feature in the land surface modeling. And these leaves are acting as an interface for many exchange between land and atmosphere, such as the exchange of energy, of the CO2, of momentum, and water. Moreover, so we have the importance of the distribution of the green leaves, as well as the importance of having the leaves in the correct time of the year. So to be able to properly represent the periodic plant life cycle, which is the so-called phenology, which is so influenced by the climate conditions, so the light availability, the soil moisture and temperature and precipitation. And we see in the recent observation that the phenology is also changing in the recent decades, and is also impacting on the land and atmosphere interaction. For this reason, it is paramount that the land surface model reproduce the correct spatial distribution and also the timing of the green leaves. Here we can see the result of our model in representing the vegetation. So here we have as a representation of the amount of green leaves, the so-called leaf area index, which give an estimate of the area of leaves compared to the each square meter of land. And in general, we can see that our model is overestimating the amount of leaves in the northern hemisphere, mid and high latitudes. And on the other hand, it's underestimating the amount over Brazil and part of south of Africa. But still, in general, the latitudinal distribution is quite comparable with the observed one. The similar biases can be also seen when we look at the plant activity. Here we are showing the gross primary productivity, in which here we still can see an overestimation in the high latitude and mid latitude of the northern hemisphere, and underestimation over Brazil and Africa. Talking about the plant life cycles, the phenology, we evaluate this feature at the global scale by using the 4 growing season type methodology, which is still using the leaf area index as a proxy for the phenology. Here, the 4 growing season type method is applied to identify the start and end of the growing season, based on 4 types of phenology that we can have. The first one, which is the evergreen, so it's the D panel, in which the phenology is not occurring itself because the amount of leaves are just a small oscillation during the year. Then we can have the single growing season that can peak in summer or peaking in the winter season. So having, depending on the major stress for the vegetation, in which we can identify one precise time of start and one precise time of end of the season. And then we can have areas where 2 growing seasons can also occur during one solar year, in which usually one of the 2 cycles are larger compared to the second one. So here we can see the ability of the model in capturing the start, the upper panels, and the end of the growing season. Here we can see that, for example, despite the overestimation of amount of leaves in the northern hemisphere high latitude, the timing of the end of the season is well represented. So there is also a disentangle between the biases in the amount of leaves and the timing of the plant life cycle. Here, in general, we can see that the start of the growing season is quite well represented at the northern hemisphere mid-latitude, while the end at the higher latitude. But still, we have areas with delay or advance, so biases in the growing season timing also up to 2 months. That can be, for example, in the high latitude for the start of the growing season, or in the tropical region for the end of the growing season, where here we have in black the observed latitudinal distribution, and in red the model one. We can also evaluate this same type of biases in a set of different CMCC land surface model. Here we can see that a similar pattern at the latitudinal distribution can be obtained with differences, large differences in the timing of start of the season at the high latitude and in the tropical areas for the end of the season. On the other hand, we can also see that there is this timing of the end of the growing season in the Northern Hemisphere high latitudes, which is also a common good feature of all the CMCC land surface model. Then we can also to keep in mind that another possible source of variability in simulating a vegetation phenology is given by the coupling with the atmosphere. So we can have atmosphere represented through observation or through the simulation of atmosphere model. So in this case, we can see that there are areas where the coupling and coupled and uncoupled run are giving also different results. Here we have a map showing the dominant biome in the different region of the globe. And we can take some of them. For example, if you consider the grass region, which is the light green areas in the Northern Hemisphere, we can see that independently on the type of model, so here we have different model, and the coupling, so the dark or light boxes, the models are quite able to capture the observed timing of both the start and the end of the growing season, where the observation is the black boxes in both panels. On the other hand, different regions, such as the one dominated by the broadleaf evergreen trees, which are the dark blue areas here, we can see that there is a larger differences between model and also between the coupled and uncoupled simulation. For example, in our cases, which are these two red boxes, the dark one is the coupled simulation and the red one is the uncoupled one. We can see that there is differences between the differences compared to the observation. So in some cases, we have that some atmospheric biases in the simulation can help in improve the representation of the phenology, or can deteriorate the simulation, the representation of phenology in the land surface model. So we saw that the vegetation acts as an interface between the land and the atmosphere, and it is also the distribution and timing of the vegetation is changing in the recent decades, influencing the land and atmosphere interaction. So it is important to be able to represent the proper space and time distribution of the vegetation. But still, many biases and uncertainties remain. So, for example, we have areas of overestimation of leaves, such as in the North Hemisphere, mid and high latitude, and areas with underestimation of the leaf area index, which is, for example, over Africa and Brazil, which is also visible then in the activity of in the vegetation productivity, as we saw. The timing, also the timing of the plant life cycle, present areas where we have large biases, which can be up to 2 months as well. And then we also see that the coupled and uncoupled run can influence in positive or negative direction the ability of the land surface model in representing the phenology. Some possible points to improve to better represent, for example, the distribution of vegetation and in particular the phenology can be the inclusion of a proper description and of the specific crop modules, as well as some improvement of the phenology parameterization based on a more recent observation data set that we have thanks to the increase of the satellite data. So we see that the land is where people live, and so it's fundamental to improve the representation of both natural and anthropogenic activity and processes in the overland, to be able to improve our future next generation of climate models. When we look at the soil representation and surface model, many of the principal hydraulic and soil properties are described using soil text, observed soil texture, which can, depending on the sources, can then be influence the distribution, the representation of the distribution of soil water, as well as the land and atmosphere fluxes and interactions. The land use, it's a possible source of climate mitigation and a possible strategy of climate mitigation. However, the land surface model have some limitation in representing the soil organic carbon changes under the land use variation. So in the vegetation, we know that the green leaves act as an interface between the land and atmosphere, but still some biases exist in the both spatial distribution and timing representation of the plant life cycle. So we have further work to be done and evaluation and development for the land surface model to reduce these uncertainties and biases in these land processes, and then that will help in improve also the representation of the entire climate system. So for example, for the soil, we have to increase the validation against observation and the use of different sources of data, as well as also using a different set of possible pedotransfer function that are available to convert the soil texture data into the soil properties. On the land use, it's required to take into account also the management practice and the harvest representation in model, which can improve the representation, for example, in the deforestation case, to represent also some anthropogenic activity that can speed up or slow down the natural response of land. And on the vegetation, we can consider to improve the representation of the different type of plants, starting from the crop, introducing a larger amount of crop types represented in model, as well as improving the phenology parameterization using some recent observation data set. So some next activity that can be done, so starting from this result, some work can be done in analyzing the soil impact on land atmosphere interaction, also using to see the areas with the largest impact, and also to validate the different sources against the observation to find better combination to be used in the land surface model at the global scale. Then it's possible to evaluate also, as I was showing, the impact of the coupling between land and atmosphere and the possible impact on the different phenology representation. So if, where and when the bias of one of the two components is influencing the other. And then on the another possible thing that can be done is also to see possible sources of the changes in the changes in the phenology when we use our model. This can be done using some idealized experiment of the UMIP effort. And on the land use, we have also some deforestation experiment, idealized one, which is acting at the global scale that can be used to further investigate the areas where the deforestation is responding faster and slower, and go deeper in the understanding of the biases and uncertainties in the land surface model. Here I give you some references, and with this I thank you all for your attention.
Thanks very much, Daniele. So I think everyone can raise their hands if they have questions, and I can give them the microphone. So please raise your hand and I will allow you to talk. If there are no questions for the moment, I can start with one. So let me see, I wrote something.
C'era una mano alzata forse.
Ah, yes, Antonio. Okay. Antonio Trabucco, I see. Please, Antonio.
Here I am. Hi, Daniele. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Very nice. Very competent work. I had some experience on the effect of different routing development under different moisture conditions. So if there is a gradient from north to south, different plants develop a different reaction to drought condition, and they can really have a different development of roots of various depth. They can really compensate a lot, like the soil moisture, the soil hydraulic properties. So I wonder, like, how complex, how do you have any specific parameterization which you can articulate for routing development based on aridity conditions? Sorry,
I missed the last point.
No, it's something that it's about possibility to make, if it's possible to have something flexible in terms of root development based on aridity. So I don't know how flexible could that be, how complicated could be that part of the development of biomass under the ground, which is hidden, but it's always critical, I think.
Okay. No, of course, in the CLM model, we have the so-called PFT, plant functional type. And so the evolution is also largely depending on the type of plant that you have. And so depends on the amount of this PFT that you can represent. So in the CLM case, we have quite a lot of PFTs, 15. So it's quite variable, the different type of, as you were saying, of routing on the plant. And so, of course, is another point to be investigated as well, the level of representation. And yeah. I don't know if I answered to all your
Yes, no, thanks. I see that it's possible to articulate more specifically PFT based on different conditions, but then I imagine it needs data.
Yeah.
Requires parameterization.
Yeah, of course, there is there is the biomass response also to the condition, as you were saying about the, I read it in this configuration of the model. You have the distribution of type of plant, which is kind of fixed, prescribed, but they can evolve depending on the climate. So, for example, if you have very dry condition and you expect to have one type of plant in that region, that plant will not grow, and so also the biomass will decay. So there is this type of response. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Antonio. Other questions? Okay, if not, I'm asking you a couple, Daniele. First of all, I wanted to know if this version of the CLM 4.5 will be also introduced in our climate forecast models.
Nice question. I think we will also work on the version, even the 5th version of the CLM. This one was the CLM 4.5 is the version used in the CMCC version of our coupled model. And then we are now working on using the CLM 5.0, I think it is, or 5.1. I don't remember if they already changed the version for the future activities. Stefano, ci sei? We lost him.
And what's the difference between the 5, CLM5 and the 4.5?
There are differences in many parameterization of land. I can tell some of them stay invariant, but I think some changes in the hydrology representation of the land surface model. There are many changes also in the carbon and nitrogen cycle representation because there was a too weak response in the CLM 4.5 in the carbon cycle in specific conditions, so they have worked on that. Then there is also a new snow module, I would say, that is representing a difference in that. And then, oh, there are other changes that I don't remember now. I was thinking. Then they also updated the routing scheme, which is.
Are these changes going along the directions that we indicated?
Okay, some of them, of course, because they, for example, introduce deeper description of the crop module as well. So now the CLM 5.0 has up to 8 different crop modules, which are different from the 2 that were available in CLM 4.5. So, and also consequently, the introduction of this crop module is also giving the possibility to activate and use also a larger amount of management activity, which can also be useful for the land use representation and also for the vegetation distribution, since it's more, it's closer, I will say, to the real world, since it's taking into account more type of crop and so their possible impact, and also the anthropogenic activity, because the crop areas, which are quite large in some areas of the globe, are strongly dependent on the anthropogenic activities of the management. So it's fundamental to have it in it.
Yeah, but my understanding of these improvements, these changes, is that they are going more in the direction of increasing the complexity of the system.
Yeah,
So adding more functional types, more
8 crops instead of 2.
yeah, more crops, more stuff, and so on and so forth. But how much the biases that you show, for example, in the seasonal cycle, on in the production of vegetation and vegetation activities in certain region, how much of these biases, in your opinion, are related to the lack of complexity and how much to something wrong in the parameterization? And so maybe more than increasing the complexity, it would be useful to work on the on the physical parameterization.
Okay. Of course, there are some aspects. For example, the carbon and nitrogen cycle in land surface model, which are also still in large development, because it's in CLM case, for example, in the CMIP 5 case, CLM was one of the few models with the carbon and nitrogen cycle already inside. Well, now in CMIP 6, a larger amount of model has it. So it's something that it's adding a complexity, but is also kind of required to describe to close the different carbon and nitrogen cycle in the system model. So of course, they are at a recent development, so at a starting point, so they need to be still improved and tuned, if it is not the best word, but they are still need some improvement. Other parameterization are based, for example, the phenology parameterization. Some of them are developed based on observation, on in situ observation, which are quite usually located in the northern hemisphere. For this reason, usually the northern hemisphere in the phenology parameterization are kind of better represented. But now there is also an increase of availability of data, both satellite, but also in situ data that can be used to better tuning or improve or rewrite, depending on what we want to focus on, these different parameterization. So there was some aspect, some parameterization which are coming from, I would say, old observation data set that can be think to be updated more than improved, I will say. So try to use more recent sources of data to make it more suitable, especially for the global representation.
Stefano, are you back?
Yes, I'm back. I'm back.
Okay. So
yeah, I got kicked out from.
so you can continue to act as moderator.
Yeah, are there any more questions from?
May I ask?
Yeah, please.
Whether the snow over land is dealt by the land model.
Yeah, it's the land model.
The melting and
Yeah.
types of snow and stuff like that. How many types of snow has the model?
Okay, in the CLM, we have as no aging.
No aging
I mean,
process.
so you have the snow that can have up to 5 layers of the land, depending on the amount of snow. Then you have all the possible influences, external and internal, I will say. You can have like the deposition of black carbon or the spins. You have the compaction of snow, so it will decrease by that. The melting, refreezing of the snow, which then with the compaction of snow, you have also a kind of a representation of the aging of the snow, which then change its characteristic.
Yes.
So not only changing the thickness, the snow layer, but also the possibility to percolate water, as well as.
Will it change the radiative properties of the snow?
The main
That's
the main
the
point
crucial
is
point.
given by mainly yeah, it's making the snow also darker with the snow age, so it's impacting, for example, the albedo, so it's impacting on the surface fluxes and reflection and the emission of the CSO.
And another question is the land atmosphere interactions with this type of treating of the soil. Do you think there is a scope for further increasing the horizontal resolution? Will it give any positive results or positive effects from the side of the soil, not on the side of the atmosphere? I mean, for example, given the resolution and the accuracy you have on soil types, for example, if you double or treble the resolution, will you still have information which is added because the soil type map is very accurate? Or
I was no.
Because you showed at the beginning the partitioning between the various soil types.
That's the point, because everything can be in some way limited by the resolution of what you can observe.
Of the original source, yes.
So for example, here in this novel data set has a 1 kilometer resolution. Then, of course, you have always to see.
Exactly. The accuracy.
Because of course, some areas can be given by one observed point and then extrapolate. We know the limit. So, but in theory, you can go up to 1 kilometer in the soil representation and having an added value in the soil representation. Of course, since we are talking at the global scale, you have also or in general, also for the local scale, you have also the limit on the observation of the other data set. So you have always to have a good balance with the coarser observation data set that you can have. So for sure, the increase in resolution, for example, in the soil case, can give deeper details in what you have, and so the possible impact between land and atmosphere. There is always this limit between the accuracy also of what you have observed.
But
if I can.
But the results you showed have been obtained with our couple model?
Yeah. Here for the soil is an AMIP-like simulation. This
It's not the couple model.
This is a land and atmosphere couple. Without the ocean is prescribed.
I see.
In this case, yeah.
Yeah, if I can add on this, I mean, the soil type data set is actually one of the most challenging part of the land surface models, because depending on the type of soil that it is actually prescribed by this observational, like with a lot of dash, depends a lot the amount of water that infiltrates in the soil, the amount of water that actually runoffs. Because of course, like each type of soil has its own permeability, porosity, etc. So, I mean,
but did I get it right that there is a soil type data set at 1 kilometer resolution?
Yes, that's what.
So that's almost surely imagination.
Exactly.
Creativity.
It's an activity of aggregation
satellite.
of different type of observation in situ, and
Yeah.
I mean, this is the nominal resolution.
And in fact, there are different soil.
There is a serious issue of validating those data sets, because it may be more harmful than good.
To increase the resolution.
Well, to use them, because 1 kilometer means that you're very depending on land use.
Yeah.
If somebody can building a shopping scenes in the center, you're changing the grid.
Yeah,
But not
course.
only, but I was wondering, I mean, if you really believe in a 1 kilometer resolution land use data, then you have to update it in time very, very often, because not only the building, but just changing the agricultural use of the land. I mean, where you make one crop, you change the crop, you change completely the properties of the soil.
Wait a second.
This is the soil
type.
Soil type.
I know, but
I mean, you
clay, sand.
you suppose that the amount of you're not bringing land from one part to the other. That's the idea.
Okay.
But it's not.
But if
Yeah,
you
no,
have,
of course.
but if you have 8 crops,
No, yeah.
how do you initialize those 8 crops if you don't have a map of crops? I mean, soil type is one thing, but then you have to define.
This is
Okay, fine.
Those are crops or vegetation types?
These are soil types.
No. When you were referring to crops,
Yeah,
those are real crops or vegetation types?
they are. They call them crop functional type, which represent. I remember all of them should be maize, sugar.
So the broad types.
Broad type of.
These are crops.
That's the crop
Those are
module.
real crops.
These are crops.
Real crop,
Forests, I mean,
Like forest, you can have
But-
like an evergreen forest.
No. Then you have to explain one more thing. The model is capable of handling 8 crop type.
Mhm.
Then you have a soil type grid
Yeah.
on which you can grow any type of crop you like.
Yeah.
Now, when you start the model,
Mhm.
the soil grid is defined, the soil type is defined by the soil grid 1 kilometer.
Yeah.
How do you start crops? What crops do you put in the model to start?
Yeah.
So there is also another
you have a
additional
land
map
use data.
at 1 kilometer resolution.
No, yeah. This one is the original resolution of the data set.
Yeah, of course. And
Then you
of course you average on
Yeah.
your grid box. But I
Yeah.
mean, for crop type, where are the data coming from?
if I they are taking the satellite observation distribution of present day distribution of the type of crop that you have.
Okay.
So
So they are
example,
reasonably
that,
well up to date because they use reasonably recent satellite data to define.
Yeah, then you have.
But then
Then you
for
have
long
the lane-
integration, it's the model. It means the
No,
crop type
no.
remains the same.
No, that's the point. In this case, you have a data set of, for example, also for the future simulation of CMCC, you have estimate, so the so-called land use harmonization activity.
Yes.
That given the expected climate change, so the
Crop type will
forcing.
change.
No, you have the forcing that you expect, so you should have a coherent change in the land use. So
Yes.
if you're
So there is a piece of code which will deal with that.
no, it's
No, it's
outside
pretty-
this thing. So you have outside models that create a reasonable land use change depending on the.
There is an evolving time series of the land
It's an evolving time series of distribution of the.
run by the model.
So if you run a 100-year run, you
Yeah.
will then change it every now and then,
Every year you have a
every year.
change in the land use.
which is prescribed by a separate piece of code outside of
Yeah.
the model.
Because that's a social
Forcing.
model.
Yeah,
okay,
that's a
okay.
socioeconomic model
The
that
land
gives.
use because the crops will be applied only to agricultural land.
Yeah.
Not to all kinds
Of
of land.
course,
Yeah.
not on the
That's
forest.
right.
Of
So
course, of course.
first you have to decide how much agricultural land
Yeah.
You have.
then you apply the crops.
And then you
And then on
see,
the
for
rest, you have the forest and the
yeah, in the
jungle,
agricultural land, the socioeconomic model
So
give
how
you the
much
information.
land you give to agriculture,
Yeah.
it's a socioeconomic issue.
Of course.
It's not a neurological
Of
issue.
course.
That are models.
Yeah.
So it's an external model which will tell
It's
you.
part of the,
It's part of the scenario.
Yes.
Exactly. It becomes part of the scenario.
And so you know the amount of agricultural distribution space, and then based on the nowadays observation, you will then split this in the type of crop that you have nowadays. So you know that here it's like 10% of Italy is agricultural, and this 10% became 5% maize, 5%.
That is clear. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Stefano?
We lost
More
Stefano.
questions? No, I'm here.
Okay.
May I ask another question?
Last one.
Yes. Can you tell us briefly about this PhD student project that you have
Okay.
about the global carbon cycle?
Yeah, he want to analyze the possible impact of extreme condition on the extreme condition of the main climate mode and variability. So now it's starting by looking at the El Nino time series and see how this El Nino condition is impacting on the vegetation around the globe. Now it's focusing on the Amazon area, and to see how this mode can impact on the vegetation activity and the carbon cycle, and then to see in the projected changing during the 21st century if these different climate modes are occurring or not, are becoming more frequent, and so impacting more the carbon cycle and the vegetation productivity in specific areas of the globe. This is one, the part that is starting to analyze now.
Okay. So
Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I think we can close it. Thanks a lot, Daniele. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and see you next time.
bye-bye.
Bye.
Ciao, ciao.